Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Mem Vav Amud Aleph, 46a of Maseches Kiddushin, starting 3 lines down on the page. At the 2 dots, third word on the line, the Gemara says, Itmar, it was said, Kitana sheniskadsha shelo l'das avia. A kitana, a minor, a girl, who accepts Kiddushin without her father's agreement. So, like we've been discussing these various cases where a man gives Kiddushin, he betroths a minor girl. So in this case, the Gemara will bring a machlokas, a dispute about the girl's right to change her mind before the approval of the father. So if, as we've been discussing, what it really comes down to, if the father doesn't know about it, is how he reacts when he finds out. Does he approve of the Kiddushin or does he not approve? But let's say before the word even reaches the father, the girl changes her mind. So does that impact the situation? So here she accepted Kiddushin. So Amar Rav says, Bein hi ubein avia yecholin la'akev. Either her or her father can be ma'akev, can prevent the Kiddushin from going through. So even though she accepted the Kiddushin, it's not yet confirmed because the father hasn't approved it. So Rav says not only can the father disapprove and cancel it, but she herself can change her mind and cancel it. V'Ravasi Amar, and Ravasi says Avia Velohi. Only her father can, she may not. She doesn't have that power. The Gemara brings a question. Eisvei Rav Huna l'Ravasi. Rav Huna asked a question on Ravasi, a contradiction on Ravasi's ruling. Ravasi said that only the father can cancel it, and Rav Huna has a question on that. V'amri la Chia barav l'Ravasi. Some say it was Chia barav who posed the question. The pasuk says, in the context of a man who is mifate a kitana, or a girl. The pasuk, not sure, I guess it would be specifically a katana, a young girl, so a minor. So a man is mifata. Mifata means he seduces her, he has relations with her, he doesn't force it, it's with her agreement, but she's a child, so what exactly does her agreement mean? So the Gemara said that the pasuk says that actually he's supposed to marry her if the family approves. So the sort of he's blemished her name by doing this with her, and so she has no hopes for marriage. The best thing for her would be to marry him. That's what is supposed to happen. However, the father can decide that he doesn't want this man to marry his daughter. And then the man pays a fine. So the pasuk says, if the father would refuse to give her as a wife to this man, so then he pays the fine. So the man pays the fine, not the father. I only know that she has the right to be ma'in, to refuse. I only know that the father has the right to refuse. It says, if the father refuses, Hi atzma minayin, she herself, where do I know that she also has the right to refuse? Talmud Lomar, ima'ing yimaying. It uses that double language. The Torah says, ima'ing yimaying, if he will surely refuse. But since it uses a double language, it's to teach me not only can the father refuse it, but the girl herself can also refuse it. Mikol makom, right? In any event, either one can refuse it. So what's the question? So we see that a girl has the right to refuse the Kiddushin. How do we see that? So built into this question is the assumption that when this man had relations with her, he was intending it for Kiddushin, right? As we learned, Bia, intercourse is a way to do Kiddushin. Now, it's supposed to be done with it has to be done with the agreement of the woman. Again, it's not something that is actually supposed to be done at all, but it works. So it works as a Kiddushin. So here, the assumption is that, in going into this question, is that what happened was this man seduced this young girl with the intent of the bia, of the intercourse, being Kiddushin. And now word is going to come to the father, and the father is going to have the choice. He can refuse it. But the Brisa learns out that from the double language of the verse, that not only can the father refuse it, but the girl can refuse it too. So we see that even after the girl has agreed to a Kiddushin, she then has the right to cancel it until before it gets approved. Or maybe, yeah, I guess at least before the father approves it. So Amar Lahu Rav. So Rav said, Lo tizlu basar ibcha. Literally, don't go by the opposite. Meaning, Rav said that that's not a good proof. Now, Rav is the one arguing on Ravasi, but he's being intellectually honest, and he's saying that that's not a good question on Ravasi. Yachol ishnuye lechu. He can answer you. Kigon shepita shelo l'shomishus. The pasuk could be talking about where he seduced her without the intent of marriage, not l'shem kiddushin, not for the purpose of marriage. And so, it's not saying that he tried to marry her and then the father can refuse it and even the girl can refuse it. He didn't try to marry her yet. That was just, he tried to have relations with her, but not for the purpose of marriage. And therefore, when it says that she could refuse it, we don't see that once there's a Kiddushin that she could refuse it. That we don't see, because it wasn't a Kiddushin in that case. Or one can say that it wasn't. So the Gemara asks, Pita shelo l'shem ishus krabai. A case where he seduces her not for the purpose of ishus, not for the purpose of marriage. Do we need a pasuk to teach me that they can refuse it? That in this case, that's not the father could refuse it. Meaning, you're now trying to suggest that the pasuk is talking about where he didn't try to marry her. It wasn't a kiddushin. There's no kiddushin here, and saying that after he has relations with her, the father has a right to refuse the marriage. Well, of course he has the right to refuse the marriage. Why? Nothing has happened yet. The father has the right to decide who his young daughter will marry. Why would I think that he can't? So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, you're right, but it's telling me something else. So Lomar Shemishalim Kanas Kimafuta. What it's teaching me is that he will still have to pay the Kanas. He will still have to pay the fine. That even what the verse is coming to teach me is that not only if the father refuses it does the man have to pay a fine, but even if the girl's the one who refuses it, the man has to pay the fine. So what we're really coming out is saying that the verse is not talking about where the relations were for the purpose of Kiddushin. The verse is talking about where they just had relations, and now what's kind of expected is that he would marry her. But the father has the right to refuse it. And what we learned is that, and of course the father has the right to refuse, but what we learned is that, in addition to that, the girl can also refuse it. Which itself, I guess, the fact that she could refuse it, maybe itself is meaning if the father approved it, so as Tosfos points out, then and the father wants to accept Kiddushin for this girl, then he certainly can. Meaning that's the father's right for a minor, so he has the right to accept the Kiddushin. But what it's teaching me is that when the way that Tosfos has an interesting approach. The way it comes out is that by her refusing, the man is now required to pay the fine. Now that doesn't actually necessarily mean that she's not going to marry him, because ultimately it's in the father's hands. But what the pasuk is teaching me, the way in one approach Tosfos comes out, is that the father can refuse it, the girl can also refuse it, and either one who refuses will make the man now required to pay the fine. Now, whether she will actually have to marry him or not, that's really up to the father, not up to her. But as a minor, right, according to by Torah law. So what we come out is that it's teaching me that when she refuses, the man, not only when the father refuses does the man have to pay the fine, but even when she refuses, he would have to pay the fine. So the Gemara asks, V'im pita. The Gemara says, Amar le Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef said back, he's bringing a proof actually. He says, Ihachi, if it's true like you're saying, that the pasuk is talking about a case where he did not try to marry her, it wasn't lishum isha, so it wasn't for the purpose of marriage, which is what we're suggesting now. He says, that's great. Hainu ditanina, that would fit into another brisa, which says, Mahor yimarena lo leisha, that the shetricha himenu kiddushin, that it says in the pasuk, Mahor yimarenu lo leisha, which is some kind of language of he should marry her, which is, again, like we said, that's what's expected, is normally he's supposed to marry her. And the Brisa says that means he should give her Kiddushin. V'im pita l'shum ishus, and if the verse was talking about where the relations, the intercourse that already took place was the Kiddushin lamali, why would he have to do Kiddushin again? What does it mean that when the pasuk says Mahar yimarenu, he should take her as a wife? He already did that. If the pasuk was talking about where the intercourse itself was for the purpose of Kiddushin. We see that it seems that it wasn't for the purpose of Kiddushin. So Amar le Abaye, so Abaye said back, no, Tzricha Kiddushin l'dasavya. What it could be telling you is that you still need the father's approval for the Kiddushin. Because like we've been saying, even if the relations were for the purpose of Kiddushin, but the father didn't know about it, so Mahar yimarenu could be saying he should take her as a wife, meaning there's still one step needed here, which is that the father would have to still approve the Kiddushin. So in terms of that part of the pasuk, it's not necessarily a proof that it's talking about a case where there is where the original relations were not for the purpose of Kiddushin. It could be that it was for the purpose of Kiddushin, but it's not clear. And so we don't have a proof either way, right? The way that we got in, just to recap how we got into this discussion, was we were discussing a case where a girl accepts Kiddushin without her father's knowledge, and then the question is she allowed herself to cancel it before the father approves it? So Rav said yes, and Rav Asi said no. And we asked on Rav Asi that you're saying that she doesn't have a right to cancel the Kiddushin. What about this pasuk where it says that if a man seduces a minor, a girl, that not only does the father have the right to reject it, she has the right to reject it. And we say, isn't it talking about where that intercourse was Kiddushin, and yet it says that she can reject it? So we see, Rav Asi, you're incorrect. She does have the right to cancel it. And the response is that no, maybe the pasuk is talking about where that original seduction, that original intercourse was not for the purpose of Kiddushin. And so there's no Kiddushin going on here, and there's no proof that she is allowed to cancel a Kiddushin. And so Rav Asi can continue to maintain that. We can't prove that that's what the pasuk is talking about, but there's no proof one way or the other. Okay. New Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, Ha'omer le'isha hiskachi li b'tamrazu. A man says to a woman, be mikudeshes to me, be betrothed to me with this date, the fruit. Hiskachi li bezu. And then he says, be mikudeshes to me with this date. So he said it twice with two different dates. Accept Kiddushin for me with this date, accept Kiddushin for me with this date. So the question is, let's say you need a pruta, you need a shava pruta. Your kiddushin has to equal a pruta. So let's say each date on its own is not a pruta, but combined they're a pruta. So is that kiddushin? So the Mishnah says, Im yesh ba'achas me'an shava pruta mikudeshes. If one of them on its own is equal to a pruta, then she's mikudeshes, then she's betrothed. V'im lav, and if not, eina mikudeshes. She's not. And that's because of the way that he said it. He said, be betrothed to me with this, be betrothed to me with this, which is separate. So one of those on its own will have to equal a pruta for that to be a kiddushin. But if he says bizu, uvizu, if he says with this date, be betrothed to me with this date, and with this date. So then he didn't say separately, be betrothed to me with this, be betrothed to me with this, be betrothed to me with this. Rather he said, be betrothed to me with this, and with this, and with this. So then, im yeshava pruta b'kulan mikudeshes. If together combined they equal a pruta, then she's mikudeshes, because he was doing it all in one shot, as one kiddushin. V'im lav eina mikudeshes. But if they don't equal a pruta, then there's no kiddushin. Haisa ocheles rishana. If she was eating them one by one as he spoke, eina mikudeshes. She's not mikudeshes, meaning if before he said, and this one, or be betrothed to me with this one, and be betrothed to me with this one, so then and she ate the first one before he mentioned the second one. So eina mikudeshes, she's not mikudeshes, until one of them on its own equals a pruta, then she would be mikudeshes, but if not, they don't combine. If she's eating them as he goes, before he mentions the next one, so then they don't combine. Now the Gemara is going to wonder which case that was going back on. Was it going back on the Reisha, the first case where he said, be betrothed to me with this date, and then separately he said, be betrothed to me with this date, and that's where we say, if she's eating them as we go along, it doesn't work? Or is it going on the second case where he said, be betrothed to me with this one, and with this one, and with this one? Okay, we'll discuss it more when the Gemara brings it up. Okay, but first the Gemara has one short thing before that. It says, Man Tana Hiskachi. Who is the author of this Mishnah, of this idea? Who holds this way that if you break it up by saying, be mikudeshes to me with this one, be mikudeshes to me to this one, that's saying that second time, be mikudeshes to me, breaks it up into two separate pieces. And each one on its own will have to equal a shava pruta. Who is the author of this Mishnah? Amar Rabba says, Reb Shimon it's Reb Shimon, De Amar, who says, Ad sheyomar shvua l'kol echad ve'echad, who says, in the context of an oath, that he is not responsible until he says a shvua for each one. What is that referring to? So actually we had this Gemara a few pages ago, back on Daf Mem Daled, and there we learned that it's talking about a case where a person, let's say, was in charge of watching the object of a number of people, and now they each say return the object, and he denies that he ever had it. So he would have to take an oath in that case. That will be a case where he denies it. He would have to take an oath. So I believe that in that case. But it would be a case where he would have to take an oath to multiple people. And so if he said, I swear, I take an oath that it could be that also he's swearing he gave it back, right? That he's claiming he gave it back. So if he says, I gave it back to you, I gave it back to you, I gave it back, or I take an oath that I gave it back to you, and to you, and to you, and to you. So that's one oath. And if he turns out that he's lying on all of them, he will only have to bring one carbon for it, because he only took one oath. But if he says, Shvua, that I swear that I returned yours, or that I don't have yours, I swear that I don't have yours, I swear that I don't have yours, and he takes separately Shvua, that divides them up. So the Gemara says that was the opinion of Reb Shimon, and so over here too, where the person says Hiskachili, he says separately, be mikudeshes with this date, be mikudeshes to me with this date. So that breaks it up as well into separate offerings, and therefore each there would have to be a date there that's worth a pruta on its own for it to be Kiddushin. Okay. So now the Gemara discusses the rest of the Mishnah. Fine. It's really going to be going on the end of the Mishnah, which said that if she's eating as it goes, so then the language of the Mishnah was Eina Mikudeshes ad sheyeh ba'achas me'an shavu pruta. She's not Mikudeshes until one of them, unless one of them is worth a pruta. So the Gemara asks, Ahaya. The Gemara asks, what is it going on? Which case? Is it going on the Reisha, or is it going on the Seifa? Is it going on the first case, or is it going on the second case? Ilema Aresha. If you say it's going on the first case was where he said to her, be Mikudeshes with this date, be Mikudeshes with this date, where the Mishnah said that she's not Mikudeshes unless one of them is worth a pruta on its own. So the Gemara says, so my irya ocheles, what difference would it make if she's eating them? Afilu manachas nami. Even if they're sitting there and she's not eating them, still, if there's no Kiddushin unless one of them on its own is worth a pruta. Deha hiskadshi li bezu kamar. Because he said, be Mikudeshes with this one, and be Mikudeshes with this one, so they don't combine. So forget it, even if she's not eating them, you need one of them to be worth a pruta on its own. So it can't be going on the Reisha. Ela Seifa. So rather you'll say it's going on the Seifa. The Seifa was, the second case of the Mishnah was where he says, be Mikudeshes to me with this date, and with this date. And we say if combined they equal at least a pruta, then there's Kiddushin. So the Gemara says, so then the Mishnah would be saying, but if she's eating them as they go, so then there will only be Kiddushin if one of them is worth a pruta. So the Gemara on its own, because they won't combine if she's eating as they go. So the Gemara asks that if it's going on the Seifa, vafilu b'kamaisa, even if she ate even if it was the first one that was worth a pruta, the one that she already ate, the milvahi, but it's alone. In other words, in the case of the Seifa, so if the guy says, be Mikudeshes to me with this one, and with this one, and with this one, and this one, and with this one. So then the Kiddushin's not done until she gets all of them. Because he's offering all of them, which means that at the time that she ate the first one, she had not yet received the entire Kiddushin. So that means that the first one was, so at the time that she received the first one, the Kiddushin wasn't over yet. The Kiddushin wasn't over yet. And so what happens? So that one that she first consumed became like a loan. It became like a loan. So in other words, she's eating these dates as she goes. Sorry, 1 second. Lost the place. She's eating these dates as she goes, and when she eats it, so now there's no Kiddushin yet, right? So now, if anything, she owes him for that date unless the Kiddushin ends up being completed. But if it doesn't, then she just owes him for that date. So in the meanwhile, it's like she lent him. It's like he lent her that date. She ate it. Now she owes him money for that. So where's the Kiddushin? The Kiddushin's with money that's with something that she already has. It's I guess actually maybe the point's not so much the money. We have a similar thing by a loan, right? If a man lends a woman money, and then says, the money that you're holding should be the Kiddushin. So that's not Kiddushin, we said. Way back on Daf Hey, I think. Way back in the beginning of the Masechta. That's not Kiddushin, because Kiddushin has to be that he gives her something now. And if she's holding money that she borrowed from him, if he forgives the loans, that's a different story. But if she's just holding money that she borrowed from him, so then that's not a Kiddushin, because he hasn't given her anything at this moment. So similarly here, so over here, he here the Kiddushin isn't over at the time that he gives her the first date. So it's not over until he gives her all of the dates. So this date is sitting in her possession in the meanwhile, just as something that is not, it's like he's lending it to her in the meanwhile. So the Gemara seems to hold that cannot be Kiddushin. So the Gemara's problem is that if the case of where she's eating as she goes is going on the Seifa, on the second part of the Mishnah, where he said you should be Mekudeshes with this and with this and with this, and it says that if she's eating them as she goes, it's only Kiddushin if one of them is worth the pruta on its own. They won't combine. Well, that's maybe okay if the last one was the one that was worth a pruta. But if it was the first one that was worth a pruta, so she already consumed that date. It's already turned into just something that she currently maybe owes him for. So that cannot become the Kiddushin. So the Gemara says, so Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Hari Shulchan, Vari Basar, Vari Sakin. We have a table here, we have meat, and we have a knife, meaning we have everything we need, Ve'ein lanu lechel, but we can't eat. He's saying we have the Mishnah here, but we just can't work with it. We don't know what it's saying. So the Gemara says, Rav Shmuel, Amri Tavai, Rav and Shmuel, they both say, Le'olam HaReisha. Really, the case of the eating is going back on the Reisha. It's going back on the first case. V'lo mi bayi kamar. And it's saying, like a lo mi bayi. It wasn't necessary to say. Meaning what? Lo mi bayi manachas. You don't need to tell me that if it's not been consumed, Diyakashava pruta ingi lo lo. Meaning what the Mishnah actually tells in the Reisha, in the beginning, is more obvious. It's saying if it's sitting there, she hasn't gotten any benefit from it. He said, Iskachi li b'tamarzu, be Mekudesh to me with this date, be Mekudesh to me with this date. So then, it's true that each one has to be worth a pruta, because they're separate Kiddushins. Fine, that's obvious in a certain sense. That's what we start off with. But we say, but even in the last case, but when she eats it right there, since she's getting this enjoyment right away, you might think that she has the intent to transact herself over, even though that date wasn't worth a pruta. It may not have been worth a pruta, but she ate it, and she had such great enjoyment from it. You might say that since it's immediate joy, immediate pleasure, that's enough to transact yourself over, even though it's not a pruta worth of pleasure, apparently, but it's immediate, and that might be enough. That's what you might have thought. Kamash Malan, that's what the Mishnah is telling you, that even though it's immediate pleasure, if it's not worth a pruta, it's not Kiddushin. That is the approach of Rav and Shmuel. Rabbi Ami says, no, really it's going on the last case. So what does it mean that it's only Kiddushin if one of them is worth a pruta. What do you mean one of them? Even the first one? The first one's, it's gone, it's a loan. You can't use that for the Kiddushin. So by the time you finish the Kiddushin, the part that was a pruta is gone. So what it means is actually bachrona shava pruta. What it means is that the last one, when it says until one of them is worth a pruta, means until the last one is worth a pruta. If the last one is worth a pruta on its own, so at the time that the Kiddushin's complete, she's, when he gives her that last wine, that's when the Kiddushin is complete. If that one is worth a shava pruta, then it's good. The fact that, the rest are consumed, it doesn't matter, because right now she's holding a shava pruta. So as long as the last one, in the case where she's eating them as she goes, then the last one has to be a pruta. That's what it means. As long as one of them is a pruta, it means the last one. Amar Rabba says Shma Mina mid Rabbi Ami twas. He says from this explanation of Rabbi Ami we can learn three things. Shma Mina hamakadish b'milva inga mikudeshes. We first of all learn that if you try to do kiddushin with a loan, it's not a good kiddushin. How do we see that from Rabbi Ami? From the fact that he accepted the question. The question, but it's a loan. How could it be the Kiddushin? And he said, you're right, that's a good question. Let's explain it this way. So that means he accepted the question. He accepted the idea that you can't do Kiddushin with a loan. So that's one thing that we learn. Ushmamina hamakadish b'milve upruta daita pruta. We also learn another idea. That let's say somebody lends somebody a lot of money and at the same time also gives him just a pruta. Or I guess her. A man lends a woman a lot of money and at the same time gives her a pruta. So, and he says, I want there to be Kiddushin with all of this. So the question is, you can't do Kiddushin with a loan. You could do Kiddushin with that one pruta. So what's she thinking about? When she accepts that, does she think she's accepting the loan, or does she have in mind for the pruta? So it's a machlokas. But some say if the loan is much larger than the pruta, then she would have in mind the loan. But you can't do Kiddushin with the loan, so it's not Kiddushin. So from Rabbi Ami we see that no, we assume that her mind is on the pruta, that she intends on the pruta, because here that's what it was. There was a loan. He was giving her these dates, and then she was consuming them. And basically owing him for all those dates until the Kiddushin was complete. So those are now alone. But now with this last one, which is only worth the pruta, the Kiddushin is good. But maybe she's having in mind all those ones that are now alone. So no, Rabbi Ami says as long as the last one's worth the pruta, it's good. We assume daita a pruta. Her mind is on the pruta. Ushma mina ma'us be'alma chosrim. And the last thing that we learn from Rabbi Ami is that in general, the money would go back if the Kiddushin is not completed. Meaning, any case where somebody gives Kiddushin, but for some reason it doesn't end up working, so what happens to that money? He gives it to the woman, and for some reason the Kiddushin doesn't go through. So what we see is that the money goes back. How do we see that? Because we're saying that the Kiddushin here is not a Kiddushin until it's complete. And so when he gives her one date, then he gives her another date, then he gives her another date, so even if the earlier ones were worth a pruta, but the Kiddushin wasn't complete at that time. That's what we're saying. What do you mean it wasn't complete? It means that and I guess more than that, we're calling it a loan. We're saying that money is not hers. Those dates are not hers. So what we see is that, and how are they not hers? Because what if the Kiddushin doesn't end up working out? If he never gives her that, he's saying, I'm going to give you this, this, and this, right? He's not done yet. Until he finishes, it's not over yet. And what we see is that we're calling, although everything he's given her up till the last thing, a loan. Until it's complete, it's just a loan. So that's because if it doesn't work out, she has to give it back, which means it's just a loan. It's just to her on loan until it's complete. So therefore, we see from here that a Kiddushin that in general, if a Kiddushin doesn't get finished, or doesn't work out in the end, that she doesn't get to keep it, she has to give it back. And that's why we view all those first dates as a loan, because until she actually accepts the final piece of the Kiddushin, those didn't technically belong to her yet, fully, because the Kiddushin wasn't yet complete. By the time she gets that last date, those ones are gone. They're consumed. It's just now money that she owes him. That can't be the Kiddushin. There's no benefit at this moment from them. She's already derived the benefit, but as long as Rabbi Ami is saying, as long as what the Mishnah is saying is that last one has to be worth a pruta. If the last date's worth a pruta, so when she accepts the last date, at that time she's getting a pruta from him, and the Kiddushin's being complete, so that would work for Kiddushin.